Straight ahead, political fallout. Republican and Democratic lawmakers in Texas discuss the U.S. Supreme Court's historic ruling on presidential immunity and the aftermath of President Biden's debate performance. Grassroots Democrats tell us whether they think President Biden should still run for re-election or step aside. Paxton probe, a recent ruling sheds light on what may be the ongoing federal investigation into Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, why one legal expert says the potential case against the AG may become more serious. Celebrating freedom, why a Dallas man who escaped from North Korea is thanking former President George W. Bush for his independence. Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Hope you're having a great extended July 4th holiday weekend. It may have been a holiday, but it sure was a busy week politically. And we begin with the continuing political fallout from President Joe Biden's performance during the June 27th debate. The president said last week no one is pushing him out and that he is still running for re-election. His comments came before he was to sit down for his first extended TV interview Friday. The president's remarks and interview also come before Vice President Kamala Harris will appear in Dallas on Wednesday to speak before the Alpha Kappa Alpha sororities gathering. But some Democrats said the president's debate was bad enough for him not to run for re-election. We asked grassroots Democrats Marjorie Asturias, Lou Blackburn, and Jody Bland what they think the president should do and about his debate performance.
It was super cringy. I was also a little bit offended by some of the statements and positioning that top-level Democrats were calling those of us who were raising these objections, these concerns, as somehow being distracted. I was really offended by that, as if somehow all of that we had observed should just have been dismissed as just an off night, because I don't think it was an off night.
And how concerned are you?
Very concerned. Concerned enough that I am seriously asking the president to reconsider his bid for re-election.
I wasn't pleased with the initial performance, I'll say. I was pleased with the information that President Biden is putting out or trying to put out versus the rhetoric and everything else that former President Trump was doing. And I can see where, as we heard earlier, there may have been, he had a cold and it might have been a little bit medicated. So I can kind of see where that might have gotten in the way. To change horses at this late, it's almost like telling the Republicans, we give up. We're going to put somebody in to practice for next time. But we shouldn't be doing that and just say, we're going to give up on Biden and just hope that we'll do better in 4 years.
I trust the president himself to make that decision. Joe Biden has proven time in and time out that he's a man of character and a man of integrity. And if he needs to step aside, I trust that he will do that if it's in the best interest of the country. I just think that the nomination of former President Trump brings a levity to this situation that may not exist otherwise. If Nikki Haley or some other Republican is standing at the precipice of the Oval Office, we're not as terrified about the future of democracy and the future of our country.
How concerned are you that former President Trump will beat President Biden in November?
That's almost like a nightmare. I think we're going to go down a very slippery slope that it's going to be very difficult to climb ourselves back uphill.
Because it's too much. It's tremendous.
I'm very fearful of Donald Trump being president again.
I'm optimistic that there's time to rebound. I think the president will have several opportunities to redeem himself. And I'm excited to see how that looks and to help change some of that narrative.
I am very concerned about former President Trump retaking the Oval Office. I am concerned with Biden's future performances in public and debates and interviews. I'm still going to vote for President Biden. I would hope that he really considers what's really good for this country moving forward, because we're not just talking about a moment in history. We're not just talking about November. We're talking about the next 4 years.
I also asked them who they'd want to see at the top of the ticket if President Biden decides to step aside.
Obviously, Vice President Harris is the natural fit in terms of name recognition and ability for folks to actually see some degree of a track record. As we all know, her polling numbers haven't been great either and have oftentimes trailed President Biden's. For me, it needs to be someone who can come in and willingly self-fund and jump in quickly and hit the ground running. So maybe someone like Governor Pritzker in Illinois.
As much as I would really love to see a woman at the top of the ticket again, I think that Gavin Newsom would be a really strong contender.
I agree that it would be maybe expected that Vice President Harris will move up, but also can go along with the governor from California as being another option. Both of them are younger. Both of them have some baggage that they're bringing to the table right now also. But the Democrats have put ourselves into this situation. At some point, we're going to have to start looking at our side benches and see who is ready to move up and move up fairly quickly. Beyond this election, looking forward to the next election, if we don't find somebody younger, more vibrant, that can catch the ear, catch the hearts and minds of America, then we're going to be in the same boat next year, the next election.
Early last week, Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Austin became the first Democrat in the U.S. House to call on President Biden to withdraw from the race.
I felt I was in a position to speak out about what I was hearing from so many of my colleagues and say we need a different course. I just think that some of the damage that was done in this debate will be very difficult to overcome. Why take a chance when there is a better alternative?
But Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Dallas told me she strongly disagrees with Doggett and said the president should stay on the ticket.
I think that it's a half-brained idea. A lot of people are saying a lot of things, but they've not explained exactly how we will be in a better position to win. Also, when we say we respect democracy and we respect people's votes, how is it that you decide who's next? Are we going to just pick the next person? It doesn't work that way.
So you don't think that President Biden's cognitive abilities would have any impact on his second term?
As it relates to his cognitive abilities, I have not personally experienced something where I say cognitively he is struggling. As it relates to, again, the stutter and struggling to get the words out, absolutely, I can see that. But even still, people are acting as if we don't have a system in place. We're not just voting for President Biden. We're voting for Vice President Kamala Harris, who is over 30 years younger than the president. And so for those that have concerns about his age, those that have concerns about his cognitive abilities, it is an entire ticket.
Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey of Fort Worth wouldn't say what he thinks the president should do going forward, but Vesey expressed deep concern about former President Donald Trump and spoke about the conversations he's had with President Biden's campaign.
I was, very disappointed with the debate. I, had been, told for a long time now that everything was good, and there was people were being discouraged to encourage other people to run in the Democratic primary. A lot of this could have obviously come out a lot early. We had a robust, primary that happened. Regardless, my goal is to make sure that Donald Trump is never president of the United States again.
Republican Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th Congressional District in North Texas told me he wants President Biden to run against Mr. Trump.
As an American, I don't think he should be president any longer, and I fully support his cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment because he's clearly not competent. That's as an American. As a partisan Republican, if you had to select the person that you'd want to run against, it would be Joe Biden, of course. I mean, I don't think he can win the election. I think he's going to lose it and lose it in a landslide. And the difficulty the Democrats have is you can't just replace him unless he wants to be replaced. If he wants to stay put, there's really no mechanism for his removal.
Now to the U.S. Supreme Court's historic ruling on presidential immunity. It stems from the criminal case against the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, who will likely go to trial on charges he tried to overturn the 2020 election. The 6 conservatives in the majority found a former president has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution when it comes carrying out constitutional duties, presumptive immunity for official acts, and no immunity for unofficial acts. The 3 liberals on the court strongly disagreed in a dissent written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who said the decision, quote, makes a mockery of the principle no man is above the law. We hear from both Congressman Fallon and Congresswoman Crockett.
I was quite devastated. I listened to oral arguments, which were interesting to say the least. And I knew that the Supreme Court wanted to go further than the question that was presented to them. I never imagined that they would tie the hands of the DOJ or any other prosecutors, for that matter, so much so that they would insulate and literally make a president be above the law. That is something that we don't stand for in this country.
I think they got it exactly right, because I don't know of many people, if any, that want the president to be above the law and to be able to commit criminal acts simply because he or she is in office. At the same time, we want to protect the president when he or she is doing their official duties, in so much as you don't want, if the other party wins the next election, to have that former president be tried for decisions they made that were, largely policy related.
Legal experts say it will be nearly impossible for the trial against Mr. Trump to take place before the November election. Coming up a little later, why a Dallas man who escaped from North Korea thanks former President George W. Bush for his freedom. But next, why one legal expert says the ongoing federal investigation into Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton may become more serious when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Now to the Paxton probe. A recent and rare ruling by the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans is shedding light on what could be the ongoing federal investigation into Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The federal appeals court judges said the Attorney General's office could not shield top officials from answering questions before a federal grand jury based on attorney-client privilege. As we've reported for years now, the FBI began looking into Paxton after his former top lieutenants reported potential allegations of bribery and other wrongdoing based on his activities with Nate Paul, a developer and campaign donor. It comes nearly 1 year after the Texas Senate cleared Paxton of all impeachment articles against him. I asked Dallas appellate attorney David Cole, who's not involved in this case, what this all means. He told me the new document reveals this case could become more serious for Paxton.
It appears from the opinion that the prosecutors who are presenting evidence to the grand jury wanted to get testimony from a couple of senior aides to Mr. Paxton in the Attorney General's office, people that worked there. And they were resisting that on various claims of attorney-client privilege. The Fifth Circuit said that those claims were not going to be accepted, certainly not as a reason to completely excuse them from testifying, and allowed at least some questioning of those people to go forward. So 2 things about this. Obviously, Mr. Paxton doesn't want these people to testify because seeking mandamus relief, emergency relief from the U.S. Court of Appeals in the middle of a grand jury proceeding like this doesn't happen every day. It's an unusual filing. And what was interesting in the opinion was what the charge was that was at issue. There's some references in there to the whole Nate Paul thing, or it's obliquely written, but it's talking about a developer. But the actual subject of the grand jury testimony appears to be obstruction of justice in connection with the federal investigation of the situation involving Mr. Paul. That's a different set of facts than what we heard played out in the impeachment case. That was all about the back and forth in the AG's office with Mr. Paul in real time. It appears here that what this federal grand jury is looking at is events after that, when the FBI started looking into the case and a potential claim that Mr. Paxton obstructed that inquiry somehow, which is a very serious offense in its own right.
I was just going to ask you about that. So what does that mean?
It's definitely, it adds a lot of complexity to Mr. Paxton's position, because it's no longer just trust me and not my aides. I'm the head guy in the office. They were working for me. It adds a whole nother layer of factual detail to it. And obstruction's a dangerous crime. And the fact that they're looking at it and aggressively trying to get this testimony from some top aides suggests that they think there's some evidence there that needs to be considered for potential prosecution.
Paxton's attorney, Dan Cogdell, declined comment. The Attorney General has previously denied any wrongdoing. The topic of religion and public education is making headlines in Texas after a law passed in Louisiana. Sarah Jenkins explains in this week's brief.
Louisiana recently became the first state to require the 10 Commandments be displayed in public schools. Almost immediately after the controversial law was passed, the state was sued by civil rights organizations and parents. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick recently pledged that Texas would pass a similar proposal. A bill to do just that was proposed during the last legislative session, but failed to get a vote in the state house. This isn't the first time states have tried to pass a law like this. Kentucky passed a law requiring the 10 Commandments be displayed in public schools in 1978, which the Supreme Court struck down, saying it violated the First Amendment. The ACLU's current lawsuit against Louisiana alleges the law violates the Supreme Court precedent separating church and state, as well as parents' First Amendment right to direct their children's religious education and upbringing.
Coming up, why a Dallas man who escaped from North Korea is thanking former President George W. Bush for his independence, when Eye on Politics comes right back. Now to celebrating freedom on this July 4th holiday weekend. A Dallas man who escaped from North Korea says he never takes his independence for granted. He told me he credits former President George W. Bush for changing his life forever.
The best way to protect our freedom is to share it with people who are not yet free.
Joseph Kim knows what it's like not to be free. As a young boy growing up in the communist dictatorship of North Korea, Kim says his mother was sent to a prison camp for trying to escape, and his older sister was sold to a man in China. Then during a famine, his dad starved to death.
I became homeless and orphan when I was 12 years old. Lived on the street as a beggar, surviving by stealing food, begging, working in coal mines.
Kim says he did that for 3 years until one winter day in 2006 when he was 15 and made what became a life-changing decision.
I decided to escape because the choices that I had was either I could die from hunger, from starvation like many homeless children did, or I could try to escape, and I decided to take that risk.
Kim was living in the North Korean city of Haryang, and he says he made his daring escape by crossing the narrow and frozen Tumen River into Yanji, China in broad daylight. Even more risky because soldiers stand guard and have orders to shoot to kill anyone who tries to leave.
In short, it was a miracle that I made it.
Did they ever discover you, even like when you were going across the river? I mean, did they fire on you?
Totally undetected.
Wow.
I think literally the soldiers was not paying attention. Trying to escape that border, even at night, is almost committing suicide.
Kim says he lived in China for a year.
I went to house, asked for leftover food.
He eventually met a group founded by American college students that helped him get to the United States in 2007. Kim says it was only possible because President George W. Bush signed the North Korean Human Rights Act of 2004. It allowed those who escaped from that brutal regime to come to the U.S. as legal refugees.
After the president left the White House, he wanted to continue supporting these North Korean defectors, recognizing their struggles and potentials.
Kim says he first met former President Bush in 2014. Then again in 2016 at the George W. Bush Institute during a forum on freedom in North Korea.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce President George W. Bush. You did a great job.
Really good. It brings great joy to my heart to be introduced by Joseph Kim. I mean, this guy's one incredibly courageous person. He's seen the full horrors of oppression in North Korea.
In 2017, the Bush Institute launched the Lindsay Lloyd North Korea Freedom Scholarship to help North Korean escapees and their children go to college. Since then, the Institute has awarded $350,000 through 84 scholarships, including Kim. He says the former president calls him a friend, but he says Mr. Bush means so much more to him.
He's my personal hero and role model.
Now a U.S. citizen, he has worked at the Bush Institute for 5 years, helping other people who escaped the same brutal dictatorship he did.
It makes me grateful to have a life that I have here, and it reminds me the incredible gift of living in a free country.
He is such an inspiration. Kim is leaving the Bush Institute and heading to Harvard University to further his studies. We wish him all the best. And remember, all of the full interviews from today are on our website, cbsnewstexas.com. Go to the Eye on Politics section. That's all for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening at CBS News Texas. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again next week. And from all of us here, have a great Sunday.